Hello, dear listeners. Welcome to News and Views. Today's program is about the American presence in Iraq and its impact on the democratic achievement of the Iraqi people. Our guest today is Mr. Caleb Maupin. Welcome to our program, Mr. Maupin.
I'm glad to be here. Thank you.
Political observers believe that the American presence in Iraq is detrimental to democratic achievements. If we want to attain democratic rights in this country, Mr. Maupin, do you think now the U.S. controls the political process once again in Iraq?
I think that's absolutely the case. President Maliki, who was the leader of the government, he has been removed. And he was removed because he was perceived by leaders of the United States as being too close to the Islamic Republic of Iran and too close to China and too close to Russia. And they wanted someone leading the Iraqi government who was simply obedient to the United States. And the ISIS situation, the fighting, kind of created an opportunity for the U.S. to kind of retake complete control of the Iraqi government. And, if you want any proof of this, up to a month before Maliki was removed, you saw in the Wall Street Journal, you saw in a whole bunch of U.S. newspapers, there's calls for him to be removed. It was directly decided in the United States that he had to go a long time ago. So, this was the U.S. Removed a president who was friendlier to countries around the world, and he has been replaced, and that shows that that all talk of democracy is really out.
Is this let's say, crisis in Iraq, the goal is, let's say, keeping the Iraqi government away from countries like Iran, Russia, China, and so forth, or there's some other, let's say, objectives behind it? For example, some people talk about U.S. seeking Iraq fragmentation.
Well, I think, in June, now if you look at the rate of oil exports, in June, the rate of export of Iraqi oil was the highest it had been since the 2003 invasion. Iraq was exporting more oil onto the international markets than it had since the U.S. invasion in 2003. And that was something that simply could not be tolerated by the U.S. oil corporations. The more oil that goes onto the market, the less valuable oil is, the less productive it is. And it seemed like some level of stability was returning to Iraq, enough that it was exporting that level of oil. So then you have the ISIS situation, and ISIS, which is a terrorist organization which was backed by the United States, backed by the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia in Syria, has now gone over the border and suddenly is killing people in Iraq. And now the U.S. has reestablished a military presence, is bombing and killing, allegedly, to fight ISIS. However, the whole situation is somewhat of a farce because ISIS could easily be defeated if the money were cut off. Money is flowing to ISIS from the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. Everyone knows it, and the money continues to flow. And local forces could easily defeat ISIS if the money were cut off. But the money continues to flow to ISIS because the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia allows it, and because the United States allows the money to continue flowing to ISIS. So we're in a situation where the U.S. is essentially funding one force and then fighting them. And the whole goal is instability and chaos. And if Iraq can be reduced to instability and chaos, a country that was once a major oil exporter can be reduced, then that oil is not going on the international markets. Then there's instability in the region. I know Nasrallah spoke about the attempt to destroy Arab nations, the attempt to fragment Arab nations. And that seems to be what is actually taking place in the Middle East. If you look at it, there's an effort to reduce strong, independent Arab countries. There's an effort to reduce them to fighting and killing and chaos and instability so that they can't emerge as economic or regional powers. They can't exist as a stable force in global politics. And that seems to be an effort. And you see that all across the Middle East and really all across the world. Whether it's the funding of ISIS and similar groups in Syria, attempting to destroy Syria, the ISIS situation in Iraq, whether you can look at what's being done to Venezuela now, where right-wing student groups are being funded to blow up buildings and attack government forces. You go down the line. Whenever a stable government is emerging, especially in an oil-exporting country that could be a competitor with U.S. oil corporations, you see an effort to create subversion and chaos in that country and reduce it and destroy it as a nation and fragment it.
Mr. Maupin, but the oil prices would rise in case of instability in Iraq, and it is not in the interest of Western countries.
Precisely. With less oil flowing on the international markets, the price goes up, and the oil that is being sold by U.S. corporations becomes more valuable. The less of it's the basic economic concept of supply and demand. The less of a commodity or a resource there is, the more valuable and the more expensive it is, and the more of it that there is, the more abundant it is, the less of it there is. And wars internationally, the U.S. is essentially creating false scarcity. And that's what we're seeing internationally is the U.S., whenever a strong oil exporting country emerges, especially if it's a state-owned oil company, as you see, then that country becomes targeted, and the goal is to remove them from the market. A lot of people are under the impression the U.S. invaded Iraq to seize its oil resources. The U.S. invaded Iraq to destroy its oil resources, to remove it as a competitor. Under Saddam Hussein, there was a nationalized Iraqi oil company. There was a competitor with the United States, and now it's removed. The top oil exporting country in Africa was Libya, led by Gaddafi, and so then that country has now been reduced to chaos and destruction. Its oil exports are a mere 10% of what they were at one point. And now you see the U.S. is even moving into Nigeria, which is another top oil exporting country in Africa. And you see Boko Haram, which has mysterious links to Saudi Arabia and other forces, is fighting the local government, and the U.S. is there with drones, again, reducing the country to chaos. The U.S. wants no competitors on the international oil markets. It wants no forces that would be able to compete with it, and it wants to create a false scarcity in order to keep the prices high.
Well, thank you very much indeed for joining us in this program, Mr. Caleb Maupin.
Well, thank you.